Welcome to our last session during this round of Borderless. I'm Olga Vikan, I will be your host today. And now we are welcoming our speaker from all the way from Canada. It's Melissa Finn, and she's a sociologist, writer, spoken word poet, very exciting thing, and recording and visual artist. So she will talk also about impact of our culture to the social media. Welcome, Melissa. Hello.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very
wonderful.
well.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Melissa Finn. I'm from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, which is about 1 hour west of Toronto. And I'm happy to be here speaking to you today about art and social change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to perform a track from my Panopticon album called Fortresses, Discourses. And it's really what it's talking about is borders, surveillance, exclusion, and the ways in which social movements can transform these conditions. So I'm going to try and play my music, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. If not, it'll be a cappella. Sorry, before I get started with this, I just want to, part of the performance is to use painting as a way to raise questions about our world. So I don't know how much of that you can see, but
We
I'm
can see
hoping it's
everything.
going to do what I want it to do. Okay, let's do this again.
Looks great.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to just play this again and then. Sorry that it's not that loud. The state speeds off sitting bucks to make a buck, it's so off target. Muslim, Black, Indigenous, queer populations often are targets bought at a self-righteous state supermarket, damaged goods and white pickup trucks stuck in their own pocket. Surveillance so far in our collective pocket, their arms out of socket. White cue balls controls the flows of social policy's docket, so that their profit is always shooting up like a rocket, and they got a hole to throw you in if you mock it. The security utility truck is not an explorer. It only traverses upon roads forged by pavers. They want favors but can't afford off-road tours. The border's not a pickup line, tools grind their papers. Tow-lining people when they ask for a shelter or life preservers, made to pay a waiver with their labor-stingy bailers, want to control your behavior, worship them as your saviors, as if they're your maker, brand you active declared protectors. Fortresses, discourses, fortresses. How much more can surveillance canvass us? Fortresses, discourses, fortresses. How much more can surveillance canvass us? Privacy makes sense, a special value for individuals and collectives, not fodder for national security priorities, and robotic technocrats using biometric data to advance elite and corporate interests. In steps, the movement of movements. Mainstreaming anti-surveillance incentives starts with civil disobedience and consciousness, spiritual wellness and centeredness, knowledge of our powers, limitlessness, politicians with conviction, backbone, self-awareness, ending the normalcy of plainclothes informants looking for criminals in bookstores, and trapping faking conversations, tracking claims of Black Lives Matter activists, protesting the shooting of unarmed civilians, mass incarceration, and of indigenous resistant protesting fracking, pipeline expansion across unceded land, surveillance and intelligence sharing among police, security personnel, oil and gas corporations, and private security firms, where the war on terror national security earns. Point the concentration on domestic actions. Here extractive capitalism dominates and erases. International law, obligations, grassroots social movements are painted as threats to the profitability of Tarzans in a world of human and animal beings. Fortresses, Discourses, discourses, fortresses. How much more can surveillance canvass us? Fortresses, discourses, discourses, fortresses. How much more can surveillance canvass us? Curbing state and corporate surveillance action helps assess risks and manage threats to humans, helps turn around who gets identified as environmental criminal extremists, elite groups demanding enormous monetary investments to build security fortresses. The abstract state needs its buttresses, public funds that could be used otherwise to prevent missing and murdered women, water poisonings, food insecurity, and youth incapacitations. In steps, the movement of movements. Mainstreaming anti-surveillance incentives starts with questions and consciousness, spiritual centeredness and wellness, knowledge of our powers, limitlessness, and public servants with principles, self-awareness, backbones, ending the normalcy of activist detentions, for protesting a lack of courageous court rulings, systematic disenfranchisements for children, living in a state of permanent panopticons, layers and layers of them, cages and cages of control. We must hand the masses a crowbar to break the mental bonds enabling many kinds of prison facilitations. So Olga, if you're there,
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about that poem. It's actually a long poem that's broken up into 14 tracks, but I'll just talk about that in my presentation. So if you can transfer me to my slides, I'll talk about my...
Right away. You're right away there.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're talking about the intersection of art and activism and how art can be used to promote social change. Who's ever manning the slides, you can go to the next slide. For this discussion, I'm going to be talking about three main things. One is agency, the other is power, and then the other is stakeholder contributions. Okay, and oftentimes we don't often hear a connection between art and artists and this concept of stakeholders. And I think it's really important that connection be made. Okay, and that's part of what I'm doing here. So we'll go to the next slide. So basically, so we should go to the next slide. Yeah, so we're talking here about the agency of artists. And the question is, what is agency? Agency has been, discussed at length in the literature. My background is in social movements and transnational activism and citizenship. And there's many ways in which agency has been conceptualized, but I'm going to just talk about one main way. Agency is the capacity to act, to mobilize despite institutional or social constraints. So that would be like, government policy, government decision-making, corporate decision-making. It would be even like social norms within your communities, from like already at the cultural level all the way up to like the municipal level or beyond. So we all have constraints in our lives. We call these structural constraints, structural like context or sort of imposing conditions on our ability to act. And it's a balance between, we are not without free will. We have the capacity to have agency. Some of us have more agency than others based on how many structural constraints we have. And so having agency really is about having the capacity to transfer skills, tools, ideas, etc., what we call social and political technologies into a social space or into a political space. And having that capacity is everything, because it means that rather than being forced into a state of inaction or forced into a state of being disempowered, we can always claim that. the conditions could be very suffocating. We could be living under a dictatorship, or we could be living under extreme financial hardship. But nonetheless, we always have a capacity in various levels along the spectrum to transfer our skills into the world, our tools, the things that we've learned, our ideas. Now, in many places in the world, ideas are suppressed. So that is one structural constraint on people who live in places where there's no freedom of expression. Agency is extremely important, both at an individual and a collective or group level, because it ensures that we live in a society where there's checks and balances, where we can hold people accountable, where we can advance and evolve and progress as a society. So, and it allows us to mobilize. So it's just, it's core to us as beings, as human beings, to have agency, to make claims on agency, and to mobilize ourselves towards the things that we value and that we hold important to us. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So the next slide is showing two images. One is the knotted gun. This is actually a copy made by the artist Carl Friedrich Reuterswald. His initial one was placed, I believe, at the UN headquarters, but there's like at least 30 copies around the world, several in Sweden, and this one is in Lebanon. And it's capturing the idea of nonviolence. And next to it is this sort of moving doll that's called Little Amal. Amal means hope in Arabic. And she is traversing now, she's traversed 13 different countries, more than 9,000 kilometers. And there's a human being inside of that puppet that is moving and meeting people and talking with people. So this is a kind of an example, especially Little Amal is like almost a encapsulation of what artistic agency is. It's not just art that is having agency. It is art that is moving physically. It is interacting. It is a performative kind of art that is creating disruptions in our thinking. I'm going to move to this. The knotted gun is provocative. It is an image that is hard to forget. And it really captures both at an individual level, this need for nonviolence. How do we manage ourselves domestically so that we are not letting things boil over? Or how are we managing ourselves as a community so that we're not allowing things to boil over? Or how are we managing things internationally so that we are not running into a situation where things are boiling over? That gun is not just a pistol. It's representative of global armaments. It's representative of the drive for nonviolence, nonproliferation of a wide variety of armaments in the world. And can we not them? Can we find alternative ways of resolving conflict rather than picking up the AK-47 or picking up the nuclear warhead or picking up the cluster bomb or picking the drone that's armed with precision, quote unquote, guided missiles, which are really imprecise because collateral damage is frequently the result of the use of these weapons. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So the question is the power of artists. And I think there's a real question, so we should go to the next slide. There's a real question about whether artists have power. Is it just aesthetic? And I would argue that it's not. The reason, and I'm going to just break it down. So what is power? Traditionally, power is the capacity to be heard at sites of decision-making. Alternatively, we can see power as the willingness to speak to or at the decision makers, to put ourselves in places where there is conversation. My argument would be that that is power. And so we get kind of this idea that art is the speaking to. It is the speaking at. It is the placing oneself in a provocative way in places where it seeks to be seen and to speak, regardless of whether it is a speaking form of art or not. Artists shape our collective consciousness. There's an excellent article in The Guardian recently, January 2023, talking about climate change and the popular consciousness. And what the writer was saying is that climate change needs new storytellers. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out my angle here. It needs storytellers. It needs people that are telling the climate change issue in a new way, that are challenging us to see it differently. And what the author was saying is that climate change needs artists. It needs people who are changing the conversation, raising new questions, provoking us, shining light on areas of neglect. And so the whole idea behind the article was that the popular consciousness is the power. The popular consciousness is where movement happens. We often find ourselves, there's an excellent book here. It's called This Is Not Art. There we go. Anyway, it's called This Is Not Art by Alana Jelinek. Anyway, the whole point of it, a good part of it, is that we think that artists are just making art, that they're only doing an aesthetic. They are shaping the popular consciousness, and they are shaping the way that we think about issues, social justice issue, racial justice, gender justice, all of these, climate justice, all of these different things are shaped by how the popular consciousness changes over time, and it can change quickly. So the conditions for an artist to wield power include refusing isolation. So when an artist refuses to be isolated, when they put themselves out there, they make their art, they do what they need to do, and then they are unafraid to showcase it. And embracing community engagement. This is an excellent way for artists to wield power. And why is this a contested idea? It's a contested idea because, like, as I said, art is traditionally seen as an aesthetic, and life is seen as the realm of ethics. And art is supposed to be art for art's sake, and life is supposed to be life for life's sake. But the thing is that art is an aesthetic. It is also an ethics. It expresses an ethics. It expresses a way of being in the world. It expresses values. It expresses norms. It expresses expectations for change or otherwise. It jolts us. So what is art activism? Art activism is the mobilization of art for social or political change. It is not the instrumentalization. It could be that, or it could be the empowerment or the rendering of the art as a subject that is speaking. And then maybe we'll go to the next slide. So this is an image that really captures very provocatively how art can be used to kind of mobilize beyond an aesthetic. This is not an aesthetic. I don't look at this and see an aesthetic. I see provocation here. I see greenery surrounded by dry, parched land and what rocks that look like a human being. So we are made to be thoughtful. We're made to be sort of instigated or moved by this image to make us think. Okay, so let's go to the last slide. So artist is a stakeholder. So what is a stakeholder? At the very basic level, a stakeholder is a person or a group who invests resources and is concerned about the outcome of certain decisions, right? So artists who invest their resources and are concerned about the outcomes of certain social issues are a stakeholder. And so what are some of the ways that artists can be stakeholders in social justice advocacy? Well, they inject their time, their talent, or their means to disrupt assumptions, force pauses, build thought, raise awareness, or promote advocacy. And how can artists and their art shape the direction of policy conversations, stakeholder conversations, decision-making policies? By participating in the conversations and by being impossible to ignore. So among those artists that are in the audience right now, I highly recommend this book that you read it. It's called Impossible to Ignore. It's by Carmen Simon. And this book is shaped my whole life. It shaped the way that I see content, the way that I see the delivery of messages. We are there. If the artist seeks to be a stakeholder, one of the ways that they can do so is by being very, very difficult to forget, very, very difficult to ignore. And so like images can be lasting. I, for example, was at the Montreal Museum of Fine Art like a month ago, and I saw a variety of art pieces, paintings, installations. Some left a lasting impression on me. I still remember them. I still feel them. I think about them. So that is what artists can do. So let's go to the next slide. This is the last slide, and then we'll have maybe a Q&A. So this is Utrecht's giant plastic whale sculpture. I believe this is in the Netherlands. And what it is plastic that has been made and constructed into the form of an orca, I believe, or it could be some other whale. But anyway, a whale. So this provokes us. We ask questions about this. This is a very tall structure. It's multiple stories tall. And so we're provoked. We're thinking about the plastic in the ocean. We're thinking about the animals. It's in the shape of the whale, so we can't escape it, not only because of its size, but because of its provocation. And we're thinking about the material that it's constructed from, knowing that we have a lot of plastic in the ocean, that animals like the orcas are swallowing this plastic. So we find such things unforgettable. Now, if you live in that city and you're driving that bridge every single day, passing that whale, yes, at some point it may be that it becomes part of just your unconscious daily routine. But it's going to be with you. You're going to be thinking about it. When you see plastic, you're going to think back to the sculpture because you pass it every single day. Now, that could be a situation where we're being exposed to art on a daily basis. But art, like I said, with the Montreal Museum of Fine Art, just being exposed like for moments, like 1 minute, I've been left with a lasting impression about some of these exhibit pieces. And they inspire me, and they make me ask questions about the thing that the artist was talking about. The thing about the aesthetic is that the idea is that art is an aesthetic, is that the artist makes the art, and then the audience or the viewer is supposed to create whatever interpretations they want of that art. But art also expresses an ethic, which is why it's very important for the artist to also be part of the communication, be part of the conversation. What was the motivation behind that art? Why was the artist making that, and what was the purpose? Now, getting back to my poem at the beginning, one of the things that I'm raising in this poem is the importance of the fact that social change does not happen with individuals. It does not happen necessarily with groups. Actually, the social science research shows that social change is made possible by movements of movements. So it's not just like a feminist, one single feminist movement who wants to, create greater access to abortion care, or, wants to reduce the instances of gender-based violence in X context. It is the coming together of multiple organizations, multiple movements, those that are dealing, for example, I do a lot of advocacy on female genital mutilation. So those that are working in Nigeria are collaborating with those that are working in the UK, those that are working in the USA. All of these collaborations are where you build centrifugal forces towards social change. And artists have a role to play in this because they're shaping very directly the popular consciousness, which shapes the directives and the energy behind these organizations. So that in a nutshell is what I wanted to talk about today. I mean, if there's any time left, maybe we can have a few questions.
Melissa, very much for your interesting topic you raised, and special thank you for the performance at the beginning. That was really nice. And I totally agree with you that the artist should be remarkable, right? We should remember them. But I have a question here. How do you feel that the social media actually can be used so artists express their message constantly and at the same time not in the boring way, so like this passing this whale, right? You said that it's starting to be a routine. Could this source of communication can be used by artists, and how efficient it is, do you think?
I think social media is an excellent tool for artists to express themselves, to be known. I also think that it can also be a detriment, and this is in the following way. Um, Artists need to be able to be creative. They need to be able to. This comes from a video actually that I watched on Instagram, and that leaves me unable to forget it. The I think it was I forget Sylvester. The last name of it was Sylvester. This guy was speaking in the 1960s about the problem. 1960s. Can you imagine about the problem of artists constantly being under the gaze, being under the public eye, not being able to just do their art and go into those creative spaces. And part of his whole comment was, can artists be in privacy where they can make mistakes, repeat themselves, do things over, get into the flow, get into the zone? And so this is so important for creative expression, so that they can do their art in the pride. And so the whole thing about the Panopticon, the poem that I spoke at the beginning, is about surveillance and about the fact that we are constantly under the gaze of others. And social media enables this gaze. Social media has instrumentalized the gaze, it's weaponized the gaze. Okay, and artists are subject to the same dynamics. But getting back to the video that the guy was saying from the 1960s, can you imagine the 1960s? He's already saying that artists do not have the freedom to make their mistakes, to explore, to all of this thing, to build gravitas around their art. And now here we are. Artists feel compelled to show their art in order to build an audience, to raise interest, and they constantly feel like they have to post. And so part of it is the question of what is the. So there's two questions going on here. One is what is happening, and what should the artist do to be successful? And I think that what is happening is that there's expectations for the artist to be available, to be showing the evolution of the artwork, to be posting videos of themselves making the artwork. And that is how you build audience. Across social media, those artists that show themselves making the art are the ones that get the eyes. Okay? But at the same time, the question is, should they feel compelled to do so? And is that inhibiting their artistic expression? And I would say it's quite possible that it could be, or that it's commercializing a process that is meant to be an ethical and aesthetic marriage. So we're finding that, in this need to post in order to gain the followership, in order to draw the interest, that in the process they are losing sort of the need for pause. Why does art move us? Art moves us because we see it and we pause. We see it and we are moved to stop and think. Right? And social media does not enable that. Scrolling does not enable that. Half the time, the people who are scrolling are half awake anyway. Okay? So, I guess the question, what I would say is, artists should do that which is going to make themselves feel like they're being true to themselves, whatever that might be. For some artists, it's to post daily and to raise awareness about what they're doing, to build conversations, and to do that on a rapid pace. I find that process to be very exhausting. I don't necessarily have time to post all the time. And also, I feel that my creativity is inhibited by that. Yeah, so that's my long answer to that question. I mean, these discussions are huge topics. I mean, we could talk for a very long time about them. Anyway, yeah, that's what I would say to that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer, because you actually cover this topic from the different angles. That's exactly why I'm asking, because it should be visible from different sides. It's not just to be visible, but it's actually exhausting process to be visible all the time. And I totally agree with you that it's like art is all about poses. You need to pose, you need to stand and think. And that's the main driver of that. So thank you very much for actually covering everything what I have in mind. Thank you. Singapore, do you have any questions for Melissa?
Thank you everyone for coming. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Seems like they're just frozen and and just enjoying the topic.
Olga, it's really important when we have these conversations that we're allowed to stop and think about them. Right? When we speak about an issue with gravitas, when we speak about an issue that has significant cultural cachet, significant social and political impact and importance, it is extremely important that we are able to stop and think about it. I have taught courses, undergraduate courses, in a variety of topics, and one of my main pedagogies is the concept of slow learning. That means we absorb, we engage, we think, we let it stew. And so part of that process is like, do we need to fire off a round of questions, or do we need to just kind of sit in the conversation and think about what's been said? I have definitely said more than enough in this 30 minutes for us all to, like, collectively think about our reality, about politics, about social change, about social justice. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to talk about this and to raise the issues that I'm raising.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. Again, as you said, it's a very important topic, and it's like is repeating art. Like, you need to actually highlight it from time to time, so people actually start to think this way, like planting the seeds and something. So thank you so much, and please, our live audience, if you have any questions to Melissa, you can write the comments under the video. We will save it on YouTube. So you can always contact her and continue these discussions, because I think we are actually planting so many seeds for the future discussions which can be done. Thank you so much, Melissa, again, for your time and for being with us all the way from Canada. That's an honor for us. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely people. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.